that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All
So the McQuades are high school sweethearts and have always had a love of the outdoors. And as you may recall, if you've heard them speak before, their lives changed dramatically in 2012 when they saw the movie The Big Year. So the idea of counting birds and deliberately targeting species had a particular appeal to them. So they started with a big weekend in 2013 and they haven't stopped since. To date, they're the only couple on eBird to have 6 consecutive years of seeing over 600 species in the lower 48. And in the last 3 years, they've seen over 700. I'm so jealous. Tammy has the distinction of having seen more birds in the lower 48 in a year than any other female in history, seeing 715 species. On eBird, they rank number 12 and number 13 all time for the US, having seen 870 and 869 birds. Oh my gosh. So they also administrate the Southwest Florida Bird Alert Group on Facebook. If you don't know it, it's really great to see what's cooking or where the birds are flying, and see photos. So they give presentations, as they are with us, to local birding groups and are guides at the local Cape Coral Burrowing Owl Festival. Additionally, they are graduates of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology Macaulay Library sound recording workshop. David is on the board for the ABA, the American Birding Association, and Tammy serves on several of their committees. They also love doing long-range pelagics on their 30-foot boat, the McLogic, in the Gulf of Mexico when time permits. They say that they're proud to have contributed to the science and data of bird distribution in the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico and feel this is their greatest birding accomplishment. So thank you so much. Look forward to hearing all about Alaska.
All right, let's get the screen shared. All right, can the panelists nod if you can see our screen so I can we're
Okay,
good?
we're good.
All right.
All right, well, on behalf of Tammy and myself, we'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Audubon again for inviting us to come and speak. Again, we love talking about our passion. And tonight, we're talking about a very special place that we are just growing to love. And we call it Birding the Last Frontier. You know, back in the spring of 2019, you know, we decided to go ahead and start planning a trip for the fall of 2019 to bird in Alaska. And when we first started looking into it, it was really intimidating. You know, we had no idea just how much, you know, real estate was up there. And as you can kind of see by this graphic, literally, if you took Alaska and laid it on top of the lower 48, it literally will stretch from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. And it's over 2.5 times the size of Texas, which for anybody that's birded Texas, that's a huge state. So this was a very intimidating task. Amongst all of that, you have to take into account that even though you're kind of birding, you know, up there in a time period where we consider it to be summer, you can have incredible weather variations. One day it can be 70 degrees and the next day it can be snowing. You know, one day it can be perfectly sunny and the next day it drizzles all day. So you've got to kind of be prepared and pack for literally any type of weather possible. And as we look at this last photo on the right-hand side over here, we can kind of see we're not 100% sure if this individual didn't pack right or if he was just incredibly hardy, because this was taken when it was starting to snow. It was 28 degrees, 20-mile-an-hour wind coming off the Bering Sea, and he's in a light little jacket and shorts. Either he's incredibly hardy or he didn't plan for the weather that can change so dramatically up there. What we found in our research was that there were certain places that we knew we had to go ahead and focus on. And if we look, at the blue dot here, that's Anchorage, Alaska. This is kind of your headquarters. This is where, when you're coming out of the lower 48, you're going to land in Anchorage, and then you're going to go ahead and hit these other spots. And basically from Anchorage, you can fly directly over to Gnome, which we're going to spend some time talking about. From Gnome, you can fly over to Gamble, which is literally only 42 miles away from Russia. You can see Russia on a clear day. Then we're going to talk about flying from Anchorage out to St. Paul, from Anchorage over to Adak, which literally Adak is at the same latitude as San Francisco. And it is literally halfway between the continental US and Japan. Very, very unique place. And then we're going to also talk about a short little drive down to a place called Seward, Alaska. So again, these are the places we're going to go ahead and talk about during our trip.
So as Dave said, Seward is literally a 2-hour car ride south to the Kenai, from Anchorage to the Kenai Fjords National Park area. And it's a beautiful 2-hour drive. We've had beluga whales in one of the sounds as we were driving down there, and just beautiful scenery. So that's really nice. Then when we get into Seward, we typically buy a package from the Harbor Inn 360. And Seward is a very touristy town. There are a lot of restaurants and touristy shops and hotels. We stay at this particular hotel because it's clean, and also because they put together packages with Major Marine Tours, which is the boat company that we take out for our birding. Now, before you go out with Major Marine Tours, there's a couple things. First of all, you can't go until after June, because this particular trip doesn't leave until after June 1st due to weather conditions around the glaciers. And you want to sign up for the 8.5-hour trip to the Northwestern Glacier. And this is very important because this is the only trip where you'll get to see the Kitslit's murrelets, which is one of our target birds. Also, before you leave, you want to make sure that you talk to the naturalist and the captain and tell them that you're birders and that you're very interested in these target birds. Most of the people who take these trips are not birders. Most of the people who take these trips are interested in the beautiful scenery, and they'd like to see humpback whales. And so it's very important that you let them know, I'm a birder and I really want to see these target birds before you leave the dock. And we found that they've been very accommodating of what we ask. The other thing that you need to do before you leave is make sure you know the birds that you are going to see. Make sure you study the field marks and you can identify them. The naturalist is wonderful, but they are an overall naturalist. We have not had a birder as a naturalist yet. And so most of the time we find we're helping the naturalist identify the birds. Now, when you take the cruise, it's the 8.5-hour cruise to the Northwest Glacier. You leave Resurrection Bay. It's beautiful. You get to see lots of typical seabirds in the area, marbled murrelets, different gulls, some alcids. And then you enter the Gulf of Alaska. And what we found when we enter the Gulf of Alaska is, first, this is the time where if you have seasickness at all, you want to make sure that you've taken your Dramamine or you're wearing your patch. You're in open water and the seas can get rough in here. And second of all, everybody on the boat goes inside and uses this as an opportunity to warm up and drink hot cocoa. And Dave and I have been the only people that stay out on the boat. We're getting splashed because we're in open water. Usually it's raining and drizzling. But it's also the time when we're going to get ancient murrelets and parakeet auklets. And you're going to see them fly by in flocks. And it's the only time on the trip we saw the ancient murrelets. We did get parakeet auklets somewhere else, but not nearly in those numbers. So as the trip continues, they go into the Northwest Glacier, and as they approach the glacier, you're going to start to see more marbled murrelets. And this is where we're going to get our main target bird, the kid-slit murrelet. Now, one of the things you want to keep in mind is kid-slit murrelets like to be up close to the glaciers, and usually they're going to be way back up into the Northwestern Glacier area. The other thing you want to pay attention to is the size of the bill. Notice that the marbled murrelet has a bigger bill and the kid-slit murrelet has a little tiny bill. Don't pay attention to plumage too much because that can vary. They aren't always, the marbled are dark and the kid-slit are light. So keep that in mind. And then as you come out of the glacier, this is where it was important that you talk to your captain. You let him know that you want to see red-faced cormorants and the puffins and some other things, because that's in the Chiswell Islands. And there are specific locations they go to see the cliffs for the puffins, the thick-billed and common murre. Notice common murre is brown, no line on the mandible. Notice the thick-billed murre is a little darker, and that white line right there is the thing you really want to look for. It's much more noticeable. It's also the only place in the area that we know of that you will find red-faced cormorants, and we were fortunate enough to get into an area where they were nesting on the cliffs there in the Chiswell Islands. Here's a short video clip. And here you'll notice we have all kinds of hundreds and thousands of shorebirds that are nesting on the cliff with kittiwakes and murre, cormorants and puffins and different houses. Additionally, on this cruise, you're of course going to see the humpbacks that everybody wants to see. We had orcas breaching, which is always fun. And the scenery is just beyond compare. The water was crystal clear and absolutely gorgeous.
A 2-hour plane ride northwest of Anchorage is Gnome, Alaska. And again, this has fast become one of our favorite places to bird up in Alaska. Gnome is kind of a unique place. It's got about 4,000 people that live up there. So, you know, a small population, you know, but definitely not like a Seward. It's not real touristy. There's not a lot up there. You can see it's not a very wealthy community. And you have to kind of think through things and kind of plan a little bit ahead, you know, because of the fact that there's just not a lot of options when it comes to things. Fortunately, they do have one decent hotel. It's called the Aurora Inn. We stayed there both this year and back in 2019. Literally, when you land at the Gnome airport, you get your baggage. The airport is a very tiny airport. And as soon as you get your luggage, there's a courtesy phone. You call a taxi. They'll bring you over. It's a 2 or 3 minute car ride over to the Aurora Inn. You check in, and this is also happens to be where you rent your vehicle. And again, it's really nice because they have 4-wheel drive pickup trucks that they rent to you. And again, something that we found to be very, very helpful to have.
And just as a side note, your cell phones will not work in Gnome. If you're interested in a cell phone, you either need to purchase a satellite phone, or you can go into the cell phone store in Gnome and get their carrier service chip for your cell phone. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Now, again, not a lot of places to get food. There is a grocery store that you typically end up having to get your breakfast from. There is a Subway, and it's probably the only Subway in the world that has a beautiful view of the Bering Sea out here. Again, this is just literally a 300-400 yard walk away from the Aurora Inn. So lots of times we would go ahead, stop by, pick up our sandwich in the morning, and throw it in the car so we would have it so we wouldn't have to come back. Because again, you know, when you're out birding, you're a long way away in many cases from food. In dinner, it's kind of fascinating. we talked to a tremendous amount of locals, and every time we would ask them, where should we eat dinner? Where should we eat dinner? There's not a lot of choices. There are 3 or 4 restaurants around, but every time everyone said, eat at Milano's, eat at Milano's. And again, as you can see, Milano's doesn't look like much from the outside. Actually, doesn't look like much on the inside either. But the food is actually pretty good. You've got a wide variety, everything from Japanese sushi to Italian to American food. So again, it's something that there is some food in Gnome, but not a lot. And you got to kind of plan your schedule accordingly to be kind of, having the food when it's available. Now, when we think about Gnome, there's 3 main roads that go out of Gnome. One is called the Council Road, which goes along the Bering Sea and Safety Sound, which is this area right here. And at one point, it leaves the Bering Sea and starts heading inland. The next road is Cougar Rock Road, which heads out this way. And then we have the final road, which is called Teller Road, that heads up to the town of Teller. These are the 3 main roads that people bird. So let's kind of take a few seconds and talk about each one of these. This is a photograph Tammy took actually from the window of the airplane. And you can see this little spit of land here, this white line is actually the Gnome Council Road. This is the Bering Sea out here. This is Safety Sound back up in here. And as you go far enough down the road, it starts leaving, the Bering Sea, and it turns inland, and it starts to look more like this, tundra with some streams that run through, occasional brush. Sometimes you got some really old historic buildings that look pretty cool. Again, Gnome Council Road it's just a phenomenal birdie road. And, besides birds, you can see some pretty cool stuff on top of that. One of the first things we saw when we got off the plane this year was this walrus, which apparently is pretty rare to see, but, it was literally 100 yards away from the car. We're driving down the road. I looked out the window and there was this walrus out there. Again, super cool. The muskox are thriving up there. Just since we were first up there in 2019, the muskox population has expanded by close to 20%. They're doing extremely well up there. So again, you have a lot of different types of wildlife besides just birds, but obviously the birds are incredible. And in Safety Sound, you get all sorts of different, Arctic loons, yellow-billed loons, Pacific loons, red-throated loons, all sorts of different types of geese. Here we've got a picture of our emperor goose that we saw there in 2019. Right at the early part of the Council Road is where the Gnome River dumps out into the Bering Sea, and Aleutian terns nest and breed there. Again, you can see tons of Aleutian terns there. Just a beautiful area right through there. Yellow wagtail are typically seen on this area. At mile marker 42 is a bridge where for the last couple years, there's been a gyrfalcon that has been nesting there. Obviously, we had to stay pretty far back, so we didn't get the greatest view. But again, we wanted to give the falcon a lot of space to not upset it since it was nesting. But again, it can be seen, not great, but you can see it there. Again, along there, you can see bar-tailed godwit. This is unfortunately one that had actually already gotten out of breeding plumage. If you're there in the fall, they tend to look more like this. If you're there in June, they tend to be, really bright, rufusy colored, just gorgeous birds. This rock sandpiper, we had several rock sandpipers literally right on Gnome Council Road. The phalarope, you see a lot of phalarope up there. Down here in the lower 48, we see a lot of phalarope, but 9 times out of 10, they've already kind of lost their breeding plumage. Not very pretty. To see a red phalarope in full breeding plumage from a close distance it really is nothing short of a stunning bird. Not to take anything away from a red-necked phalarope, but a red phalarope is really, really cool to see. On the Gnome Council Road, there's this man-made jetty that juts out into the Bering Sea. And this is where everybody does sea watches. And you can kind of see here, we've got, this is our white truck over here. This is one of the tour vans that had stopped. There's another tour van right here. Very popular spot for stopping to do sea watches here. And we found that we tried to stop usually in the morning. If we were on the council road, maybe again, midday. And then every night we would go back, have dinner at Milano's. And then, most people by 5 o'clock, they were already tucked into their room for the night. We would have a dinner at 6 or 7 o'clock. Then we'd go back out to the sea watch and do sea watches until 9:30, 10, 10:30 at night, because it stays light until 1 o'clock in the morning. So, we felt that by getting up earlier than everybody and staying up later than everybody, we would go ahead and pick up a lot more birds. And based off of what we saw, we did. So this is something that's a great relaxing way to spend your evening after dinner, going out and, doing a sea watch here. Some of the things that you see here: parakeet auklet, Stennecker scoter. Again, this is a recent split off from white-winged scoter. Again, you have to sift through a tremendous amount of white-winged scoters, but every now and then you'll pick up one that has this little knob right here on the bill, which tells you it's a Stennecker scoter. Again, we had a few of them while we were there. And again, the Sea Watch in Nome is one of the best places to get a Stennecker scoter in the ABA area. Again, one of the nights when we were up there about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, we had two stellar eiders that came in and hung out. And we just felt, horrible that nobody else was around to share these birds. They were all back in their room. And again, we got to watch these birds, and ultimately they after about 20 minutes or so, they flew off. We've had spectacle eiders, at the Sea Watch. Again, yellow-billed loons, auklets, just lots of great birds go through, that jetty there. Cougar Rock Road is one that just runs straight out of Nome. Starts literally, about 1.5 miles away from the Bering Sea, and literally goes for about 86 miles. However, you don't have to go the entire distance. It is a gravel road. Our trip out this road, we were thrilled that we had a 4-wheel drive, simply because of the fact that it had been snowy. The road was a little on the slushy side in a couple places. It was nice to have a 4-wheel drive vehicle because we were sliding around a little bit. The view, just stunning out there, just a gorgeous place. About halfway down the road, around mile marker 40, if I recall, is a turnoff for Salmon Lake Campground. And at that turnoff is a great spot for blue throat in the early June time period. They'll be out singing. We had half a dozen blue throats around. They are kind of skittish, not super easy to sneak up on them. They don't tend to let you get real close. But again, just a stunning bird. We had an Arctic warbler literally 5 feet, off the intersection there. Again, another important target bird for us. But then at mile marker 72, you come to a spot that is the main destination on Cougar Rock Road. And on the left-hand side, as you pull up, there's a hill that you walk up. And you probably have to climb maybe about 300 feet, 400 feet of elevation. And when you get up there, it just kind of plateaus out into this little brushy area that covers a huge area. And this is where people go to look for bristle-thighed curlew. And again, this is our bristle-thighed curlew. It's a bird that you can get down in Hawaii in the wintertime. You get it up in Alaska during the summertime. And again, just really kind of magical to see these birds up there displaying. The last road is Teller Road. And again, it's about 80 miles all the way out to Teller. But again, we're going in the 35 to 42 mile range through here, where we start kind of getting up into a little bit of a mountain range area. And this is going to be where you're going to find your willow ptarmigan and your rock ptarmigan. The willow ptarmigan, you have to make sure you don't run over them because they're, lots of times they're right on the road. And a couple of times they kind of like hopped out right in front of the car and I had to hit the brake and they kind of, went back off the road again. The rock ptarmigan, they're going to be kind of up on the slope. So you have to kind of look out a little bit further out to see them. You're going to get incredible views of the willow ptarmigan though. The rock ptarmigan, a little bit tougher. And again, as we went down this road, we only had time to go down the road one time. And unfortunately, as we got halfway there, after we got those pictures you just saw, it started snowing. Again, we're talking around June 8th now. And this is what it looked like. Those are actually muskox that you saw in the background. So again, a little bit higher elevation there. Just a lot of great birds in Gnome. I really only have hit on just a few of the birds that you can see there, but some of the birds that are more expected there.
Okay, and now I'm going to talk about Gamble, Alaska. Gamble is an island out in the Bering Sea. And as Dave said, it's about 45 miles from Russia. We actually went there with a tour group in the fall of 2019. One of the things about Gamble is that you have to take a very small airplane from Gnome out to Gamble, and you're not always guaranteed that your luggage will make it on the plane. Food and other things for the residents of the island take priority. So I believe there have been times where some of the people from the different groups have gotten out there and their suitcase didn't make it. So they encouraged us to wear anything that was important. So I wore my winter coat, my rain pants, my rain boots, and my pocket. I had my hats and glove. I had my binoculars, and I had my camera in my arms. They did not let me take a backpack on the plane. So I had to sort of cram everything into pockets. So that's something else to keep in mind. When you get out to Gamble, also, everything on Gamble is flown in. And so you can't bring, so one of the reasons why we come with a tour group is so that they bring a chef and food, and you don't have to worry about carting all of your food supplies with you. The tour group takes care of that. So that is something to think about. When you go out there, we stayed in the Gamble Hotel. I say hotel loosely, very modest accommodations, a very hard twin-size bed, 2 in each room. The walls were so thin at this hotel that I could literally hear the man in the next room take a deep breath at night, let alone snoring. So again, very modest accommodations when you stay there. The tour groups rent ATVs from the residents of the island. And so you use an ATV to get around the island. The entire island is basically gravel and rock. And so it's very difficult to walk in. And so we were very thankful and actually had a really good time with the ATVs. And this is the gas station. And here's the little grocery store. Again, everything is carted in, so the prices in the grocery store were extremely high and they had very limited supplies of very little. On the island, we had gray-tailed tattler and white wagtail right along the shore, which are pretty common birds for the island. Most people, if you're going to go out there, you're going out there for the rarities. And you just have to hope that the winds and the weather bring in the birds from Asia. And unfortunately for us on this trip, those birds all arrived 24 hours after we left. But we did still get some really great birds on the island. This is a Gamble Sea Watch. You take your ATVs out to the beach, again, all gravel. You sit on the beach and you're looking out to sea. And I mean, it's just constant action, birds everywhere. We had least auklet, we had parakeet auklet, we had crest. This says parakeet auklet. This is actually a crested auklet. I apologize for that. We had slaty-back gull, we had short-tailed shearwaters, we had loons, we had just a large number of everything. This was one of our Sea Watch days, and you can see the weather wasn't really great, but what we found is the worse the weather, the better the Sea Watch. And so I'm gonna play this short clip and you can just see constant action out in front of us of birds walking around. It was really incredible. Gamble does have some great cliffs with nesting auklets and nesting alcids, like puffin and crested auklets nest there. And we just had a great time. And this was, I think, the only sunny day that we had in the 4 or 5 days we were there. The Gamble Boneyard is perhaps the real reason why people go to Gamble to bird. The Gamble Boneyard is quite literally a place where the indigenous people dump the carcasses of the whales and walruses and seals that they hunt to survive. Maybe not as much survival now as in the past, but it is still a very important part of their culture, and they do harvest a small amount of that. And they dump it all into a big pile, all the remains. And over the years, those remains have covered over with plants, and it makes the perfect habitat for a migrating bird to come in and land and rest and get food. It's got vegetation for cover, and the rotting carcasses attract a lot of flies and bugs, so they've got plenty of food. And so birders walk through this area looking to flush a rarity or, you know, one of the more common birds that they get there. And it's a tough way of birding, but it is a great day when you have got some rarities. We had red-throated pipit and brambling and just some great birds in the boneyard. One thing I wanted to mention was that the locals also dig holes in this boneyard, and they bring up old ivory, which is very valuable, of course, but they leave the holes. So when you're walking through the boneyard, you're walking through waist-high brush, you're walking over top of big bones that are sticking out, and you have to avoid all the big pits that they've dug for ivory. And when we were there, we had a gentleman that was birding right behind me, and I heard this noise and I turned around and he had literally disappeared into a hole that was 6 feet deep. Fortunately, he wasn't hurt, but it can be pretty treacherous. But this is the famous Gamble Boneyard that you'll hear about, where big ear birders go and get all the really great rarities. Gamble also has a dump. It's located right on the beach. It's beachfront property. There's nowhere else to put their trash. They dump it right on the beach in a big pile, and they burn it down occasionally. So you get to smell rotting, burning trash in this area. But it is a great spot to get some seabirds and maybe even some rare gulls. In addition, this same area is where a lot of the septic from the island drains into a cesspool, and it attracts shorebirds, believe it or not, because cesspools attract flies and bugs. And so in this area, we had sharp-tailed sandpiper and common ringed plover. And so we did always make a stop there every day to see what they might find.
St. Paul Island is a lot nicer than Gamble. We definitely enjoy St. Paul a lot more. We went there in 2019. We were scheduled to go back there last year. It got canceled. We were scheduled to go back there this year. Again, COVID canceled it. We're scheduled to go there next year. We're hoping for a little bit better turnout there. Again, couple-hour flight to St. Paul. But on the way out to St. Paul, they stop just on the coast here to refuel. Because one of the problems that you run into, whether you're flying out here to Gamble, which is right here, or down to St. Paul, is the fact that fog can roll in very quickly, and they have to be able to turn around. And going from Gnome over to Gamble isn't very far, but going from Anchorage to St. Paul can be a long way. So they want to be able to refuel here just in case they get over here and have to turn around and fly back. When you leave St. Paul, it's a direct flight back to Anchorage. Now, St. Paul is interesting. There's a couple ways you can actually bird St. Paul. One is to, just go out and sign up for a tour with any of the tour companies out there that go to St. Paul. However, what happens is all people that bird on St. Paul end up staying at the exact same hotel, because there's only one hotel. They end up eating at the exact same place at the exact same time as every other person. And they end up all having a St. Paul guide, and they all end up in a St. Paul tour company bus or van. The only difference is if you go with a different tour operator, you're going to have an extra guide, say from a Wings or somebody like that. But on the other side of the coin, you're going to be paying an extra $1,000 to $1,500 for that. So literally, this was a tip that a former guide up there had given us, was to book directly with the St. Paul company, and sure enough, we birded with the exact same guides, went to the exact same places, ate with our friends who were on the other tour, and it saved us quite a bit of money per person. So again, something you can kind of decide if you want to go ahead and have the extra guides working with you, or if you want to go ahead and have basically save the money. Again, St. Paul, a lot nicer, more developed community. It has a deep water port there that the crab fishermen from Deadliest Catch, they go in there to offload catch. A lot of fishing boats go in there to offload their fish. There's a big processing facility. Again, a lot more developed community. Again, just a very beautiful area, around the island. This is the airport over here on the right, that rusty building. That's the airport hangar. You literally get off the airplane, walk through the hangar, and then you walk into the hotel, which is the white building right here. So again, all right next to each other. Again, if the Aurora Inn is a 3-star place and Gamble is a 1-star place, this is probably a 2-star.
2+.
2+. So again, but the food, they actually, the food is all prepared at the the cannery or the fish processing facility. So you're actually eating with the people that are working, off of the boats, and that are processing the fish and the crab and everything like that. You're all eating together in this big buffet, and the food is decent. A lot better than what you would ever see on Gamble. A lot of the area on St. Paul is marshy. So you're wearing rubber boots and you're kind of walking through, almost kind of like a sparrow walk where you're trying to flush birds. Again, so you have to have rubber boots out here. Again, a common snipe, a northern weed eater were things that we flushed out of the brush. There were a lot of other birds that we flushed, too. Again, just kind of giving you a few ideas. The thing, though, that I think Tammy and I like the most about St. Paul is this cliff. And again, literally, this cliff is loaded with different types of alcids, different, pelagic cormorants, red-legged kittiwake, and they're all just sitting there on the cliffs. They breed there. Just a phenomenal cliff. Tammy said she could spend days there just sitting there photographing the birds there. It's really just a stunning place. And again, like I said, this is where you get your red-legged kittiwake. northern fulmar, all, both the meres, all the puffins. It's just literally, like I said, just a phenomenal place to literally be eye level and looking at all of these different birds there. Just like I said, stunning place. And we really hope we can get back there. Down around the harbor, you've got these cute little Arctic foxes running all around. Again, pretty neat, area down there. And again, they're known for having the largest colony of northern fur seals in the world. So again, hundreds and hundreds of these were up on the beach down there as we went by. So again, kind of cool to see those.
And so for us, what's left in Alaska? Well, there's a lot left, but in 2022, we are going to add Adak onto our itinerary. And Adak is this little island that's kind of as far south as San Francisco and kind of halfway between or halfway in the middle of the Bering Sea. So we'll be going to Adak. And again, Adak's one of those places like Gamble, like St. Paul, where traditionally big ear birders go looking for the rarities, but you have to hit the wind and the weather just right, or else you just kind of get good birds. And so for us, the rarities are obviously what we're looking for, but we're also going to Adak because it looks like it's just a beautiful place. And we want to get the whiskered auklet. We have been told they're there by the thousands. We have a pelagic trip planned, and it will be the last alcid in the ABA area that we need for our life list. And I have wanted this bird for a while, so I'm just really excited that we're going to be out there and get this bird.
Yeah, so we're pretty excited about that. We've got our deposit in, and again, we've got actually three other people going with us on our trip next year to Alaska. So pretty excited about that. There's many ways to kind of bird up there. You can bird alone. This year, all of our birding was done just the two of us by ourselves. Obviously, I would probably suggest if you've never been there, to take a guide.
Or a tour group.
Or a tour group. There are a lot of great tours up there, a lot of great guides, but there's really only one Aaron Lang, and we've got to know Aaron. Ironically, we have not actually hired him, but we've got to know him. We've got to see him, and a lot of the guides up there are good, but we witnessed this year. We watched a guide on the Seed Watch. And call out and ID birds and stuff like that. Aaron seems to pick the birds out before anybody else does. He hears them, he sees them. Just a phenomenal guide. So if you were looking for a guide that runs tours up there, I would tend to be inclined to say he is one that you definitely want to talk to.
And so with that, we want to thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. We hope that you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions or want to ask us anything about the trip, that maybe something you forgot, please take down our emails. We'd be happy to help or assist in any way that we can.
And I think at this point, we'll open it up for questions if we still have time.
And how do I
stop sharing?
Stop sharing. There we go.
Yeah. All right. So there are a couple. You're muted, Margie.
Thank you. I'd just like to start by asking you, how long were these trips in terms of the days that, the different trips?
So we spent 4 days in Gnome this year. When you go with a tour group, that seems to be the same amount of time. Most of we had a tour group fly in with us, and they left with us. So that seems you spend about a day on each road, and then it gives you an extra day because of weather. Because some of the locations in Gnome, you can get weathered out with snow and ice. Gamble, it's about I think it was about a four-day trip. St. Paul's a 4-day trip. That seems to be, pretty standard. We just spent one night in Seward because we were just there for that cruise, but it's a beautiful area and there are other birds in the area, so you could easily spend several nights there.
Yeah, and literally right across from the motel in Seward where we did the Kenai Fjords trip, For those that are interested, you can go in there and hear or see a varied thrush. They're singing back in there in June. It's really pretty
Really
magical
pretty.
to hear them singing.
Yeah. So for us, we were there a little less than 2 weeks. Next year, our trip is Gnome, Adak, and
St.
St. Paul and Seward. And we're going to be gone for, I think, 16 days. So, somewhere around there, you can easily do it in less time. But you kind of have to allow for weather, especially when you're going to the islands, because you can get stuck on the island and it interferes with the next trip. So you sort of have to allow time in between for bad weather.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. There's a Q&A.
Okay.
So
What-
Mark Shockton is asking, what time of year do you go to Seward and do the Northwest Glacier tour?
So as I'd said, they don't start the Northwest Glacier tour until the beginning of June. So you'd need to check with Major Marine Tours to make sure that's, on the schedule for next year if you're going to go close to the 1st of June. But birding in Alaska is typically, Dave called it a summer event. They consider June spring in Alaska. So, but typically it's the last week of May and the first couple weeks of June are the best spring birding in Alaska. And the fall birding is typically the first couple weeks of September. It's not a real long season, so.
Yeah, if I was going to bird Seward, I would definitely try, and go out on that cruise. I would definitely try and do the first couple weeks of June. If you start going later in the year, they start, the Kitslip murrelet will start losing their breeding plumage. And when they start losing their breeding plumage,
They're really hard to tell from marbles.
then you're having to sit there and take a look at the pictures and say, gee, is the bill small, is it not? It's a lot easier to ID the Kitslip when they're in their breeding plumage.
And another place you can go, which we have not gone, is you can go over to Homer, and there is a captain in Homer that runs like a ferry service, and he will take people out for Kitslip murrelet. And typically that's, pretty much all he sees as far as rarities or whatever. But we do have a lot of big ear birders, and they go over to Homer to get that bird. So.
And Captain Stolefoots is the guy
Okay, yeah.
that runs the tour out, or
Yeah.
the trip. It's like an hour or two trip out of Homer.
Yeah, so that's another option for people that really want that bird. Any other questions?
Jean?
Yeah, if there are no other questions waiting.
There
in
is.
S-
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Let that other person go ahead.
So there's a Q&A, Margie.
Yeah, someone else is in the Q&A. Sue Herring wants to know, have you noticed climate change affecting the areas you traveled in Alaska?
So we've only been up there birding in 2019 and then this year, 2021. So I can't really say we noticed it affecting our birding in Alaska because it's only been 3 years. But when you talk to the guides and people up there, they definitely seem to feel that climate change is affecting Alaska. And I can tell you, in the amount of time Dave and I have birded across the United States, we see changes in the climate affecting birding across the United States. So I would say the answer to your question is yes, unfortunately.
And I think that if you were to go up to Barrow, which we have not gone to Barrow,
Right.
but if you were to go up to Barrow for the Ross's gull, the Iceland, and the ivory gull, I think it's a little bit more noticeable up there.
Yeah, much warmer climate, and they're saying the birds are not coming in like they used to.
Because those birds typically are hanging out on the ice pack,
Yeah,
and if there's not,
an ice pack, you're not going to see them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So Philippa Randall in the UK is saying, in the UK, we would speak about flushing out birds such as grouse to shoot them. I was somewhat amazed to hear that you flush them out to watch them. Any comments about this?
I mean, it's, they do sparrow walks here in the United States to flush sparrows out of the fields so that they can see them. I mean, I think this dates back to Audubon. I mean, if you look at the history of birding, he would flush birds and he would shoot them so he could identify them. So typically none of this is done during the heart of their breeding season. And I mean, they aren't chasing them down. They're walking through there and they flush them one time and try to get an ID and, probably never seen again. Most of the birds we saw one time. You didn't really get a lot of second opportunities.
Well, you also have to remember, these are birds that are single birds. They're not breeding there.
They're lost.
They're basically, the winds carried them off and they got lost.
Mm-hmm.
Or they migrated the wrong direction, which happens a lot. When you look at bird migrations, there are a lot of reasons why sometimes birds get confused. You'll have a Western tanager that's in Colorado, and instead of heading south down to Mexico, for some reason it takes off and it heads down to Fort Myers, Florida. It shouldn't be heading, east, it should be heading south. And the same thing happens. And, sometimes it's wind related where you're just, you're praying for these strong winds out of the west to blow stuff from Russia over. And sometimes they just took a wrong turn. They took a left instead of a right. They just get confused.
Right. So definitely, I don't feel it's affecting their breeding or
because these
the
birds aren't
health of
breeding
the
there.
bird. And they're all really good birders in most of these places that we're at, and we're all very cognizant of making sure we're not doing any harm. So,
And I guess you're not, I mean, maybe you're just really saying this, but you're not really ever competing with hunters to look at the birds anyway, right? You said at Gamble, sometimes they're not nice to birders, but
yeah, well, sometimes the teenagers on Gamble, when we were there, the indigenous people, the teenagers there, decided that it would be funny to shoot an emperor goose in the middle of the lake. And they wounded it, they didn't kill it, and it suffered for several days and stayed out in the middle. And it was, kind of upsetting to all of us birders. But, I don't know. There are hunters in the US, and that's like a whole nother topic that we could talk about. So, but yeah.
Sarah Faulkner asks, were there any good birding places in the Anchorage or Denali areas?
So yes, first of all, the Denali area, you can get gyrfalcon up in Denali. It's also an area that on the road to Denali and past Denali, a little bit later, like second, third week of June, the Arctic warblers start coming in there. So that can be good. Then just outside of Anchorage, which again, Denali, I want to say is like a 3.5 hour car ride. About 30-40 minutes outside of Anchorage is the Arctic Valley ski area. And for those that are a little bit more adventurous and a little bit better shape, you can hike up to the top of the ridge. And we had a day to kill because we always kind of plan an extra day just in case we get weathered in before we have to go to the next spot. So we had a day to kill because we didn't have any weather issues with our travel. So we went up to the Arctic Valley, hiked up to the top, and we saw rock ptarmigan up there. But in 2019, we got socked in with fog, and it was real wet and slippery. And I actually rolled down the valley about a 30-foot ravine and ended up hurting my ankle and ended up in the emergency care later that day.
It's a challenging hike because it's muddy and you're walking around in tundra, and it's just.
And you got little shrubs about this high that grab your feet and like trip you.
Yeah. So, but yes, there are, and I'm sure there are other areas around Anchorage. We just really haven't spent that much time.
Yeah, most of the things that are in the Anchorage area itself are things that you're going to see in the lower 48. Maybe not in Florida, but you'll definitely see it in the lower 48.
All right. That's it. Jean, you had a question.
Well, I was just referring back to Seward. You took an 8.5 hour trip there, but I know that there are other, you can take other boat trips out into the Kenai Fords for 3 hours or 4 hours or 5 hours. So if you don't have your 8.5 hour or you can't tolerate it, you can go on smaller trips. And
Unfortunately, the smaller trips don't go out as far as the Chiswell Islands.
No,
and the
that's true.
Northwest Glacier, and that's where we got all of our birds.
Yeah, I mean,
In Resurrection Bay, you're pretty limited to marbled murrelets and
maybe a couple puffins.
maybe a couple puffins if you're lucky. So you definitely, I would definitely say if you're interested in birds, you need to do the 8.5 hour trip.
Good to know.
Yeah, I would honestly, I would consider any of the other trips to be
More nature cruises.
more
than
nature
birding
cruises.
trips.
And if you were really there to bird, not really worth the expense.
Yeah.
some of us have spouses who are not birders.
Oh, but there's
Oh.
plenty of other things to see on this trip. We were the only birders on
Yeah,
that.
we were the only
8.5 hour
birders there.
trip. So, everybody else was having a great time watching humpback whales breed.
Yes, that's
We had
right,
orcas, we had
Sea
sea lions that
sea
were laying
otters.
on floating ice and giving us little shows. And so it entertained everybody
Yeah,
else.
mountain goats and, bear. And I mean, we've had all sorts of stuff on that.
It's
I
a
mean,
great trip.
it's just a
really is.
phenomenal
And
trip
very
for anybody.
Very comfortable. You could go inside and have hot tea and hot cocoa, and they fed us lunch, and
It's a
so
must do.
it's a must. It was wonderful.
And you could take any non-birder there and they will enjoy it if they like
Okay,
anything
good.
outdoors. And it's gorgeous,
Yeah.
just gorgeous scenery.
So Jean, how about we plan a trip to Alaska sometime?
Well, actually, we have done one in the past. So yeah, if you want to plan one, Margie, go ahead. I'm sure a lot of people would want to go with you.
All right.
Well, thank you. I think that's all for the questions, and thank you so much for
Yeah.
always being there. I'm sure you, what do you think you'll want to talk about next fall?
Have to think about
I
it.
don't know.
All right. I want to make one announcement. So we have a sustainability day coming up at the celery fields. It's actually next month, but